The only thing that we're interested in is putting money in your wallet. If you want to bet the fights, if you want to have a little bit of action, you are in the right place. With my partner, Ian Parker, I am Gerald Okamoto.
We're ready to rock between our parlays, our props, our straight picks. It's time to make money. Let's go.
Ah, yes, another UFC Fight Week, which means another edition of UFC Best Bets. You are in the right place if you are looking to put a little action on the fights this weekend. I am Brett Okamoto, joined as always by Ian Parker. Ian is down there in Florida, as he usually is. We're going to see each other next weekend in Phoenix for UFC 274. I am actually in Dallas right now, but I would be back in Las Vegas for UFC Fight Night at the Apex with a main event between Marlon Cheeto Vera and Rob Font. And I got to say, Ian, I'm very excited about that fight because it is it is an action-packed fight. I would say one of, on paper, one of the better headliners of the UFC Fight Nights this year. Would you agree?
I do agree. You have somebody in Cheeto Vera who just always brings the violence. He always brings the fight. Loves to strike, action-packed. And then you got a guy in Rob Font who's a busy fighter. Loves being on the feet, great striker. I'm really excited to see how this fight pans out. You got two guys that are really to take the next step in their competition. You know, you got Vera coming off that win over Frankie Edgar and Font off that 5-round loss to Jose Aldo. We'll see where these two go from here.
Yeah, I always kind of looked at Rob Font as one of the sort of low-key entertaining guys in the bantamweight division. And now I kind of look at Marlon Vera like that. I don't think sometimes he gets enough credit for just how glorious it is to watch Marlon Vera inside the octagon, but he's got a tough fight ahead of him here against Rob Font. Before we break that down, we got to look back on how we did last week. Ian, I will let you dig into your bets and let us know how you did.
Yeah, last week, not the best. We've done way better, and sometimes it happens with betting. You know, we got Linz and Pacquiao over 1.5. That got a little sweaty. The second fight with Elsie, you know what? He got dropped by a body shot. Unfortunately, Guida fell to a knee bar. Claudio Puelles, we got to keep an eye on that guy. He is the real deal. And Jessica Andrade, that standing arm triangle, getting us the win, ending the night on a positive note. We're going to carry that momentum. And we got another main event streak going on, Brett. I kind of like hitting those main events. It carries over into next week. So this week, we get back on it.
Yeah, man. I say this all the time. I mean, of course, we want to go 4-0 and hit the parlay every single time. But you had a large degree of confidence in Jessica Andrade. I could feel that talking to you last week, and you had won me over. I mean, when I was looking at that line, I said, yeah, man, this just seems too low. So hopefully our viewers felt that confidence and got in on that main event to cash on Jessica Andrade. Let's go ahead and get to the main card here. On ESPN Plus. You can watch it headlined again, as I mentioned, by that bantamweight fight between Rob Font and Marlon Vera. You got a heavyweight fight between Andre Arlovski last weekend. In the co-main event, you had a guy in Clay Guida who's been going on forever. Here you got another guy who's been going on forever, and Andre Arlovski taking on Jake Collier. Andre Feely, Joe Anderson Brito was a fun featherweight fight. Jared Gordon, Grant Dawson minus 180. I'm excited to talk to you about that one. Darren Elkins, Tristan Connolly, and Christoph Yako versus Gerald Mirshard, who had a great year in 2021. But when we talk about this main card, let's start with, of course, that main event. And, Rob Font coming off of a loss to Jose Aldo, in which he was a small favorite, actually, in that going into that fight, loses that fight. He's fought great competition, man. He is, prior to that, he had beaten Cody Garbrandt, Marlon Moraes, Ricky Simon, Sergio Pettis. Those are quality wins. And I know some of those guys are sort of in a little bit of a decline. I personally look at those as still very, very impressive victories. And then you got Cheeto Vera, who at 29 is really starting to coming into his own. I think he scares me a little bit. I wouldn't want to bet against Cheeto Vera. However, it took him all the way up until he had a little bit of a dicey fight against Frankie Edgar. I thought he was losing that fight until he landed a fight-changing blow with that kick to the to Frankie's chin. So how do you break down this fight, and what are you thinking in terms of just the value or lack of value that you're seeing in both these guys right now?
Well, look, we could. People are in love with Cheeto Vera because of the way he fights, his style, and you should be. This is what we look for in a high-level caliber UFC fighter, someone who likes to bring the action, doesn't like to just grapple in a way where it's doing nothing, not even advancing his position. He loves elbows. He loves standing and striking. He is a tough guy. The fight against Sean O'Malley, he was very methodical, and we've seen him even on the ground. He is just got very tough ground and pound. He's got good submissions. His striking keeps getting better and better. And as a fighter, I believe he is evolving. But the one place where he seems to just kind of stay and can't get past, he's a slow starter. And the second part is when he's on his back, gets a good wrestler, he kind of gets neutralized. We saw it with Frankie Edgar. Frankie Edgar, Brett, you are correct. I had the same thing. I had Frankie up 2-0 going into that final fight. That looked like a Frankie Edgar decision written all over it. It looked like a very disappointing loss for Chito Vera until he landed that front kick to the face and knocked Frankie out. For Chito, 5-round fight. Yes, it favors him in a way because he's a slow starter. So if he gives up rounds 1 and 2, he's got 3, 4, and 5 to come back. But this is not the fight where he wants to do that. You know, for me, I think Chito has to start in round 1. He's got to get those calf kicks off. He can't fall behind 2 rounds against a guy in Rob Font, who, A, doesn't get knocked out, he's a high-level IQ fighter, very defensively sound. He's a good striker. I think he is going to have the reach here. Great jab, and I think Font's cardio and pace could be what gets it done for him. We've seen in other fights, Font's game is getting better and better as well. And sometimes a loss is a gain long term. For him to lose to someone like Jose Aldo over 5 rounds, all he could do is learn from it. We know Font can box. We know that he's got good on-top ground game. Off his back, if he can stand up, that's the way he gets it done. But for me, I like Rob Font here. I also like this fight to go over 1.5, over 2.5, over 3.5 rounds. I think this is going to go the distance. But for me, I just think that Font's output, cardio, and the slow start of Chito is going to play against him. So I'm going with Rob Font.
Yeah, man, it's interesting that you like the over 3.5 rounds because I agree with you. I get like this feels like the kind of fight to me when you have 2 veterans, you have 2 guys who I believe have a pretty high fight IQ. You mentioned the slow starting of Marlon Vera, but then the durability and the cardio. It just feels like 2 guys who are going to go 25 minutes to me. Not saying that they can't get a finish because, of course, they can. In fact, these guys are both tied for second most in the division's history with knockouts. Vera has the most finishes in bantamweight UFC history, which I did not know before they told me right before we started taping this. I think that flies a little bit under the radar, but does that give you any pause? Does it give you any pause that these guys, you know, when you look at the actual numbers, when you look at it on paper and you're kind of doing film, you're like, man, I feel like this fight's going to go the distance. But then you look at the numbers and say, man, these guys have gotten a lot of finishes. Why are we not expecting a finish necessarily here?
I think the people that they finished are just guys that, you know, the opportunities were there. I mean, look, Frankie, unfortunately, is not the same Frankie Edgar that once, you know, in the Great Maynard fight, you couldn't put him away. He was a zombie. But then you saw him against Corey Sandhagen. You've seen him now. He gets touched on the chin. He's a little bit different. Same thing with Font when he fights a guy like a Cody Garbrandt, you know, even though that went all the way. You know, for me, it's just you have 2 guys that are very durable, that are very smart fighters. And like I said, Chito takes his time. Font doesn't put himself in bad positions. So I think this is a fight that's extremely important to both guys. I think they're going to be very conservative in the beginning. They're not going to get too reckless. Of the 2, maybe Chito does because sometimes he gets a little emotional when he fights from behind if he needs the knockout. I just don't see that happening. I think we're going to get a nice 5-round fun fight here between the 2 guys.
Yeah, and let me ask you one more thing about this main event, Ian, and then we'll move on.
Please.
Is that how do you think the market is valuing Rob Font? You just saw a second ago the closing odds on his last 5 fights. Man, this guy has been a favorite against Jose Aldo. He's been a favorite against Cody Garbrandt. He's favored against Sergio Pettis, which I know that Sergio Pettis at that time was not necessarily the Sergio Pettis he is today. Ricky Simone. I mean, I know that both of us are very, very, very high on Ricky Simone. It just feels like you're paying a premium for Rob Font. It feels like he was flying under the radar for a large portion of his career, and now he is not. Do you think that, you know, you like Rob Font in this fight, but you feel like you're paying full price for him as a favorite here?
I actually love this number at -130. I thought the -155 was a little bit more accurate, only based on more of the wins over higher level competition. You know, Chito Vera also. I mean, look, Rob's also been in a 5-round fight before. He's had a couple of them. For me, Font's fought higher level competition. Chito's been a little also more inconsistent with his wins. You know, he's had kind of an up and down, up and down. I think he's finally got a few wins in a row for the first time. So for me, this makes sense for Font to be where he's at. You know, I think the people where the line is maybe even coming down, you're getting a better number, is people are kind of buying into the narrative of Chito Vera, you know, with the whole slow start, but that means he's just going to explode in rounds 3, 4, and 5. They're forgetting that Rob Font can go 5 rounds at a ridiculously good pace.
All right, moving on from that main event, let's go to the co-main event. Jake Collier versus Andre Arlovski. Jake Collier, sometimes we talk about this, Ian. This guy has gone 10 fights in the UFC. He has alternated win-loss in every single one of them. Before we started doing this show, I didn't really realize how often that happens. Sometimes this just, these guys, man, they go years without a winning streak or a losing streak. That applies to Collier. 5-5, alternating on every single one. And then Andre Arlovski, answer me this. Should we just be blindly betting the over on every Andre Arlovski fight at this point? Because he is 12 of his last 14 fights have gone to the distance. And I think it's easy to understand why, is that this guy has he's such a veteran. He's so experienced that he's almost doing the Tyron Woodley thing where he's not really throwing fight-ending shots, but he knows how to defend himself and to take a small degree of damage. And that's why these fights are going the distance. It seems like they easily go the distance every time. Is that a safe bet here, or do we think that there might be a finish in this co-main event?
Oh, I think it's extremely safe. I really do. Look, Andre Arlovski is becoming someone who is understanding health. He's understanding his long-term career. At this pace, he's fighting until age 50. He might set the record. He's not taking any damage, to your point. He's winning fights correctly. He's winning them in a way where he just is not putting himself in danger. He's getting the paychecks. Look, he's not climbing the ladder of going to a heavyweight title fight anytime soon. He's not breaking into the top 7 anytime soon. But every time they put someone in front of him who is looking to get to the next level, minus Tom Aspinall, Arlovski is getting it done. And actually, in that first round, Arlovski, for the most part, was looking good against Aspinall until Aspinall came out like a bat out of hell and bum rushed him and submitted him. But outside of that, Arlovski's boxing's been looking good. And look, Jake Collier is a very intriguing heavyweight prospect. I can't believe I even just said that, going from middleweight, blowing up to heavyweight. He's almost like the fighter we didn't know we wanted, but we need. He's fun, and he's making these fights exciting. The fight against Chase Sherman, he won by submission. He's having, striking battles, and he looks good. It's, against Vellante, he looked good. He's putting it together. I think he's feeling himself at heavyweight. However, and I'm going to put the whole back and forth, up and down record to the side, although it seems to hold true. I like Andre Arlovski here. I think of the two, he is the better boxer. As much as Collier in his brain is a middleweight wrestler, his body is just not the same. This is not Chase Sherman, who doesn't have the best takedown defense. We'll get to that later. But Arlovski's got good takedown defense. He has become a high IQ fighter. He's become a point fighter. So for me, I think Andre Arlovski's boxing gets it done. And we got a little bit of a special pick with him later on. But Arlovski at minus 150, I think this works. And to your point, Brett, yeah, it goes the whole way.
Yeah. Yeah, I gotta say, it is not always the most entertaining thing. Andre Arlovski, it just feels like he's at a point in his career where he's coming in, he's clocking out. He's not talking a whole lot of trash. He's not hyping a fight. He's just showing up, doing what he needs to do to win the fight, keep himself out of damage, and then move on to the next one. And you gotta respect it, man. If I was Andre Arlovski, I'd be doing the exact same thing. Let's move on to a 145-pound fight between Andre Fili and Joanderson Brito. Fili only had one fight in 2021 and ended, unfortunately, in a no contest due to an eye poke. And Brito is a 27-year-old from Brazil. Are we high on this guy at plus 180 against Andre Fili? Is there some value there, or does Andre Fili get his 2022 off to a good start?
Well, look, let's start with Brito. Off the Contender Series, he looked fantastic. And this is a guy that we've known. He's extremely aggressive. Gas tank is a little bit questionable. But what we saw in his last fight, if you are able to wrestle him, put him on his back, and hold him there, and kind of drag him, it's not necessarily deep waters, but into the rounds and really weigh on him, he just doesn't have an answer for it. And what we saw out of Fili up until then is the guy can wrestle. He's starting to put it all together. This is not the young gun Fili who's coming out trying to force a knockout. This is now a seasoned Fili who wants to win. He wants to do that little Andre Touchy-Feely dance. I like Andre Fili here. At this number, it's a little high, so we will put him in our parlay. I just think that his experience level of competition, and believe it or not, what he used to not have now, he's got patience. And I think if he allows Brito to just throw reckless, double leg him, take him to the ground, and hold him there for a little bit, Fili gets a smart win here, and I think he starts off this year with a W.
I agree with you, man. It doesn't feel like he has a lot of momentum. Again, because he only fought once last year and it was a no contest, but I have liked sort of the progression that I've seen out of Andre Fili over the last couple of years. Let's go to 155 pounds. This is the one that I mentioned right off the bat when we saw this main card. I was curious to talk to you about it, man, because Grant Dawson, the industry has liked Grant Dawson, man. They've been very high on Dawson very early on in his career. Trains with our buddy James Krause down there at Glory MMA. He was a minus 525 favorite against Ricky Glenn, and he fought Ricky Glenn to a draw. So you almost got to kind of reset and be like, hey, is the market getting a little over ahead of itself with Grant Dawson, especially here now when he's fighting Jared Gordon, who has won 4 of his last 5. His only loss was to Charles Oliveira, and he's just kind of a dog, man. Like a guy who will not be easy to put away. Dawson's still a minus 180 favorite. So I'm thinking to myself here, hey, because of what happened in Dawson's last fight, could we get him at a great price here? Or was the market just wrong and Dawson should have never been that high to begin with?
I think the answer is both. You know what? I think that early in his career against a guy like Ricky Glenn, who stylistically could present a problem for Dawson, that number was really high. And here, minus 180 is definitely a more, fun number if you wanted to play him. But I think Jared Gordon is a nightmare matchup for Dawson. You know, Dawson's going to look to wrestle. I don't think he's the better striker here. And Gordon, Brett, you said it, dude is a dog, and he has fought high-level competition. He's a good wrestler himself. And the one thing that he has over Dawson, we've seen Dawson fade. Gordon does not fade. Gas tank for days. And I think that if he can make it really ugly, and I think if he can really just make this a wrestling match and put Dawson on his back, I think that Grant Dawson is going to be in a lot of trouble here. Now, I think this fight goes the distance. That's my play 1,000%. Okay, we see Jared Gordon when he's able to take over, but if you want to take a flyer on a dog throughout this card, I think Gordon's the one.
All right, so the official pick is going the distance, but, you know, maybe it's one of those situations, Ian, where if we kill the prelims and you want to take a little shot on a main card underdog, Jared Gordon is your man. Let's go back to the 145-pound division. Darren Elkins, who has a headache when it comes to, I think, trying to get right on gambling. You know, he wins as an underdog, as we know. He's lost as a favorite. He's just hard to pinpoint. You know, he's just a guy who's going to take his lumps, but then sometime he's going to persevere and win those fights. Just a hard guy to handicap, I think, taking on Tristan Connolly. It is Elkins as your favorite, minus 175. What do you make of this one?
Man, Elkins gives me a ton of anxiety watching him fight because, you know, it pains me to see how much damage this guy takes. And that's just how he is. However, I think this is the first time where he's fighting someone who's not known for power, not known for causing a ton of damage. And what we saw with Tristan Donnelly in his last fight is he can be controlled on the ground. He can get out-wrestled, out-grappled. And with the striking, he gets a little desperate in those situations. I think for Darren Elkins, we are going to see Darren Elkins from like 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, the wrestler here. Because if he comes out and gets Tristan Connolly on his back right away, he's not going to avoid any damage. We know if you sneeze on Darren Elkins, he's going to bleed, and he kind of likes that. But for me, this is Elkins' time to shine here. I think the wrestling comes into play, and I like the damage here. I like Elkins as the favorite.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you're going to find a fight where he takes no damage. That's probably why he tattooed it across his chest. Let's finish up this main card at 185 pounds. Gerald Mirshard, who again had a great year in 2021, 3-0, including cashing as a plus 440 underdog in one of those fights. He's taking off Krzysztof Jotko, who didn't have a bad 2021. He went 1-1 with a win over Misha Serkinov, a former prospect that a lot of people were high on, and Sean Strickland's on a roll right now. So look at this as a pretty competitive fight. The odds like Jotko at minus 170. Is that the way we're going, or do we think Mirshard can keep this momentum going this year?
You want to talk about guys that are so hard to cap. GM3, Gerald Mirshard, is that guy. You know, he looks like he's out of every fight until he's not. And I think this is probably one of the fights in a long time where I don't know where Jotko is going to be overly threatening or where he could dominate Mirshard. You know, he can get on top. He could probably get decent control. But Mirshard is so good off his back. He's so creative with his submissions. And his striking is not bad. You know, it just seems like he gets taken down a little bit too easily, or he goes for the guillotine and then he slips out. I'm going to go with Gerald Mirshard here. I think he pulls it off again. I don't know if it's necessarily going to be a late submission, but I think the grappling, I think he's better. I think he's got to get to a point where it's either I can't just always come back and win these fights. I think this is a winnable fight for him, and at plus 145, I think he's worth a flyer.
All right, Ian putting a plant on a dog there to finish up the main card, Gerald Mirshard at plus 145. So now we are approaching what is quickly becoming my favorite part of this program, and that is Ian Parker's parlay. We missed it last week when we went for a big shot at plus 300, but prior to that, we had hit 2 weeks in a row. So tell me, where are we going with the parlay this weekend, Ian?
Yeah, last week fell short early. This week we come back. So we're going to go with Tyra on the money line at minus 240. I think he gets it done. Striking is there. back to Andre Touchy-Feely. We talked about it a few minutes ago against Brito. If he establishes the wrestling, doesn't get himself in a brawl, and uses that IQ, I like him at that number. Arlovski, Collier, yes, you read that right. Over 1.5. And look at that line, Brett, minus 400. I'm taking that all the way in the parlay. I think that's our most conservative play there. And Font and Cheeto, over 2.5. That's going to still give us a plus 221 on the payout. So Tyra, Feely, over 1.5 in the heavyweights, over 2.5 in the main.
Yep, death, taxes, and an Andre Arlovski fight going the full 15 these days is pretty much guaranteed. All right, let's hit the rest of the prelims. Ian, we'll do rapid fire. We'll pull them up for you. Walk us through all of your picks for the prelims for UFC Fight Night this Saturday.
All right, so let's start from the bottom. Tyra, inside the distance, minus 110. I like him here. Gina Mazzani, she should get this done against Shauna Young, who is fighting for her job. Mazzani won really a good fight against Ostovich, lost to Girl Zombie, but this time matchup is good for her. I think she wins. I like Natan Levy here over Mike Breeden. Look, Green and Johan, this is a tough fight. I'm leaning the underdog. I just think he's a little bit better everywhere. Taking the dog money on that one. Daniel Da Silva against Little Fig or Bigger Fig, Other Fig, whatever you want to call him in this one. I just think that Figueiredo is not a good decision maker, puts himself in a lot of bad positions. Da Silva will take advantage of that. And last but not least, Romanov Sherman, not bettable for a reason. Minus 2,000 is possibly, if not the biggest favorite of all time. Again, Sherman at plus 1,000, I think is top two of biggest underdogs. Romanov should roll here, but that's a big number that I'm not willing to take a risk on.
Well, now I've seen everything, dude. I never thought in the history of this show that I would ever see the words "not bettable" put down by Ian Parker. I mean, you can basically come up with literally anything, and Ian Parker will be willing to take action on it. So tell me, why is this the one? Why is this the one? Why can we not find a single way to bet this fight that was supposed to happen last week? A little bit of a medical situation that they said was pushed back 7 days to this weekend. Why can't we find something on this fight, Ian?
I mean, look, if you want to risk $2,000 to win $1 or whatever it is, that's on you. You know, look, here's the deal. Romanov is just a matchup nightmare for Chase Sherman. Between the striking, just athletic size, take him to the ground. It's going to end quick. Even under 1.5 is minus 300. If you can find a prop inside the distance or by TK or KO, anything that gives you something reasonable, throw in a parlay, by all means. But minus 2,000, look, we've seen crazier things happen. These guys wear very tiny gloves. They're heavyweights. You know, what if Chase Sherman catches him with a knee on the way in or an uppercut that just dazes him for a second? You never know. So if you could find something in the prop section that's even in the minus 250s, throw it in a parlay. But, Brett, I haven't been able to find anything. That's why it's just literally become not bettable. I mean, Romanov's literal nickname should be not bettable.
Well, you know, sometimes if you believe in the power of positive momentum, positive vibes, maybe you just throw $5 on it to win like 5 cents. You know, just to like say you cashed the ticket. You know, your ticket won't even be worth as much money
just for principle. Yeah.
As a paper that it takes to print it on, but at least you could say like, hey man, I hit a win right before going into the main card, you know, because I do believe in the power of positive thinking. I believe in the power of positive thinking when it comes to your best bets, Ian. Let's hit a home run this weekend. Let's go 4-0, 5-0, whatever the case is on your best bets. Tell us where we're going right now.
Well, let's add Romanov with my expertise to win the 5 cents. We're going to make that Brett's best bet for this week. I like Font and Vera over 3.5 rounds. I also really do like Rob Font. I think the matchup works in his favor. I think that he takes the first 2 rounds due to Cheeto's slow start. And I don't think Cheeto's going to be able to come back against a guy like Font, who's just so well-rounded and so smart and does not fade. Andre Arlovski, Brett, yes, by decision at plus 135. So we're going to take that it goes all the way and that he wins, get plus odds. Gina Mazzani, this has got to be her fight to win. If she doesn't win this, can't be in the UFC at this point. I think she has all the tools. She's got a good camp, got a good coach in James Krause. She is well-rounded. She's just got to put it together. And with the opponent she has, I think this is a good time to shine. And Tatsuro Taira inside the distance. This guy is a knockout artist. I'm excited to see him in the UFC at plus 110. Those are my best bets.
All right, man. It is a fun card. We talked through the main card, the prelims, the parlays, the best bets. I'm really looking forward to this main event. It's such an important main event for both guys. There's a lot of big names up there at 135. We're kind of waiting around to see what happens. Aljamain's John back and forth with TJ. He's John back and forth with Henry Cejudo. Jose Aldo's up there in the mix. So quietly, if these guys want to get in those conversations, they got to be perfect. They've got to win those fights. So big one for Chito Vera and Rob Font. We will be watching it at the Apex on Saturday. Hopefully, we gave you some good advice. You'll be winning some money, and then you can find us in Phoenix at UFC 274 next week. We will see you then.